Hello and welcome to the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast. This is for November 14th, 2024, episode 323. Stand-up comedian, actor, improviser, and dreamer, Paul Green, coming to you, sharing my journey, thoughts, and insights as I pursue my dreams in the hopes that perhaps you might pursue yours as well. I'll tell you what, this has been an exhausting week, and it's only going to get more so because this has been the final tech week for the sketch comedy troupe that I am currently acting with, called Patent Pending. And tomorrow night, or probably technically tonight by the time you listen to this, will be opening night of said sketch comedy performance, and it has been a wild ride. And the show's starting to come together near too soon, seeing as how we open tonight. I'll tell you, anybody out there, if you've never done live theater, especially live, more like community theater, it is just an explosion of confetti. It is just pure chaos. And trying to get a cast of actors and crew and props and set pieces and lighting design and sound effects and a venue, I mean, it is just so much work. And we're all volunteering, so, this ain't necessarily Broadway here to where it's like a profitable, or you hope it's profitable, to where there's actually like money to pay everybody to be there. And so, we're all volunteering our time, which means I can't think of a single rehearsal we've ever had where everybody's been there. Heck, I mean, I've missed so many of the rehearsals because I was traveling out of town, had other shows. Even tonight, we were supposed to show up at rehearsal started at 7:00, but I got an offer to do some stand-up at my hometown comedy club, and so I was like, well, can't turn that opportunity down. So I went and did a set at JP's Comedy Club, and then drove straight from the comedy club to the theater for our dress rehearsal. And when we get to the dress rehearsal, come to find out the entire lighting design that was programmed into the computer had been erased or something. I don't know, but they still didn't have the lights figured out. They have been working on those lights all week. Matter of fact, the first two tech rehearsals, Monday and Tuesday, we didn't even run the show. We were just going scene by scene by scene, trying to figure out every single lighting cue. I mean, that alone is just dozens of hours that go into just making sure the lighting is what it needs to be for this show. It is just really... it's just wild. It's just crazy, all of the work that has gone into putting this show. But we did a dress rehearsal tonight. It went okay. Still some glitches. It was difficult because the lighting, the lady running the lights pretty much just said, hey, we're going to have to reprogram this whole thing. So I'm just going to be up here figuring out the lights. So just run the scenes and understand that there's not going to be any lighting lined up with the rehearsal. We're like, oh, okay, that's good. So then we did a dress rehearsal. We did get through the entire show. Rehearsal started at 7:00 and we finished up at about around midnight. During one of the sketches, the fire alarm went off. So we're just trying to do this dress rehearsal, and then the fire alarm and an actual voice came over some loudspeaker and was like, warning, there is a fire in the building. Please leave immediately. And we're all just like, what the hell is going on? Oh, and that happened twice. So we had two fire alarms, and then evidently those fire alarms did something with the electrical to where all the lights went off, and they had to like reset the lights. I don't know. The whole night was just crazy. But the good news is when we actually were able to run the sketches were coming together. And hopefully they're funny. I mean, that's the crazy thing about this is you could do all this work and show up and have an audience show up and them just not really like it that much. So who knows? I think there's a lot of funny moments in the show. So we'll see how opening night goes for the patent pending sketch comedy live show this weekend. So dress rehearsal went really well. My stand-up set at JP's Comedy Club, it didn't feel super great. I had to go first, obviously, because I had to get to my rehearsal, and yeah, I couldn't tell if I was maybe just a little too nervous or if the audience wasn't just quite warmed up enough. I still get in my head all the time when I perform. I'm working on it, but it's a weird thing that I'm discovering just as I'm learning more about myself as a performer when I do stand up, which is there's a certain point to where if the audience is with me, then I start to relax, I feel more safe, and I feel more present. But if I don't feel the audience is with me within the first couple of bits, or, I sense sort of some hesitancy, or, maybe I riff a little bit up front, or I'm just kind of being in the moment and I don't get some laughs right off the bat, then I find that I find myself in this sort of emotional state, which is not super comfortable. And then I get even more in my head because I know, like, oh, if I'm feeling this, then I'm probably conveying this emotion inadvertently to the audience, which is only going to make them pull back, although, they may not be aware of it consciously. So it kind of becomes this downward spiral. And I've been aware of that for a while, although I've never really dove into what's really going on when I feel that way. When I sort of feel this kind of panicky, disconnected, oh no, what if this set isn't going to be a set that ends up going well, or this audience just doesn't really relate to me, or, I'm not on my A game in terms of delivering my material or whatever it is. And, that's not good. That's not good. And I need to figure out how to not respond to that. Well, I need to learn how to not feel that in the first place. Like, I need to learn how I can show up and feel safe within my own skin without needing the audience to validate me. That's what it is. It's kind of a neediness. It's like I need this audience to validate me instead of me just showing up as an artist and just saying, "Hey, I've got a point of view to share, and I got some material and some jokes, and I know they're funny. This is what I think. This is what I feel, and if you laugh or not, it's not my problem. I'm going to be okay, right?" Because, neediness is a turnoff. It's kind of counterintuitive. It's like the more that I need the audience to laugh at me, the less inclined they're going to be to laugh, right? It's like, when you're starting out, like if you're starting a new relationship or you're, in the dating phase, if you show up like, oh, I need somebody, I am not okay, and I need this person to accept this date, and I need them to show up, and I need them to like me, blah, 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 like that's a huge turnoff. And trust me, I know that because I used to be that way all the time. I used to be so, uh, needy, and well, evidently I still am. As a performer, I'm so much better though. I'm trying to give myself a little credit here. I'm just sharing my thoughts and observations about myself in the show tonight. So, just something to be aware of how can I find my fulfillment internally so that I'm not requiring or I'm not approaching an audience from a place of lack or neediness or needing them to laugh at me or support me. I can just show up and be present and be confident in myself regardless of how any individual joke goes, But I'm giving myself some grace, which brings us to the next part of the podcast, which is where I like to review a book that I'm reading or any sort of like self-help positive, anything that I'm interacting with. And trust me, I interact with quite a bit of it. So I have been listening to on Audible a book called Mind Magic, which is a book that really tries to create a marriage between neuroscience and the actual functionality of the human brain and sort of more of the spiritual metaphysical practices of manifesting what it is that you want in life. So I have found the book, overall, I like the message of the book. I have found the book a little difficult to follow along because, neuroscience is complicated and the author is an actual neuroscientist. I think he's a brain surgeon, and he gets a little technical for my taste. But overall, once he kind of gets through the technical jargon of the brain, he's ultimately still sharing the similar messages of, any sort of your like typical self-help people, like The Secret or whatever, or your Tony Robbins. Ultimately getting your mind focused on what it is that you really want in life, and then getting your actions to line up with your vision, and then add a little consistency in there, add a little perseverance, add a little unwillingness to quit and just to keep trying, then maybe sprinkle in a little bit of luck, and voila, you've got your hopes and dreams, more or less. And today's chapter, interestingly enough, was a meditation sort of exercise chapter. Throughout the book, he will do these meditations and sort of these mantras. And today's chapter was called Practicing Self-Compassion. Oh, man. Just the title alone to me is so important and so significant. And I think probably one of the biggest challenges for me is, and for me currently, and the challenge that has been throughout my life, is learning to train the my little inner voice, my little voice that speaks to me. And I don't know if you all have this, but I've got just this little inner voice, and I kind of talk to it even though it is me. And we kind of have these sort of conversations. And I can remember as a really young child starting to become aware of that inner voice. And man, I don't even know how much I want to try to go into this, but I'll tell you that little inner voice is very fascinating, just that it exists. Because why is it there in the first place, and where does it come from? And if I'm talking to it, but it is me, then who's programming it, and who is telling it what to say back to me? Ugh. Well, I have learned through a lot of work and a lot of inner work that I actually do get to control what that inner voice thinks and feels. Now, it doesn't feel that way initially. It feels like it's involuntary, but it's actually not involuntary at all. I actually get to choose what that voice says, and I have made a concerted effort, especially in the more recent years of my life, to really put some reins on that inner voice and how it speaks to me, because it hasn't always been the case that it has been too kind. And there have been plenty of times throughout my life where that voice has been rather harsh and critical towards me. And once I started to recognize that, and then to also recognize that I do have power to influence that voice, I determined that I was going to really make an effort to start to speak to myself with a tremendous amount of love and compassion and understanding and encouragement. And it's so fascinating to me how mean I was to myself. It's like, who taught me to be that way? And I know that I'm not alone in this problem. I've heard so many other people, share similar struggles, that their inner voice is kind of a dick. And why? I don't know why. I don't know why that is, but it is something that I think is universal enough to know that there's something going on there, and that's it. Just another part of life that we need to try to get a hold of and try to improve and make adjustments and see if we can't be a little more kinder to ourselves, gives ourselves a little more understanding. I'm actually pretty sure I shared this story recently, but I'll share it again, and I'm going to miss a ton of details, but ultimately there was this woman who was talking to her therapist or whatever, and she had just gotten out of a bad marriage, and so she's back on the dating market again, and then she has this date plan, and the dude stands her up. And then the way that the guy who's telling the story tells it says, so this guy stands her up, so she calls a friend, and then the friend starts saying, well, of course he stood you up. You're unattractive, you're overweight, you have all this baggage, you just went through a divorce, you have all these kids, no man would want you. And of course, when I heard the story, everybody is going like, oh, what? What sort of friend would say that? And then the speaker goes, well, actually, it wasn't a friend who said that. That is what she said to herself. And obviously, this speaker was illustrating the point that we do have a tendency to be so harsh and critical and even downright mean when we talk to ourselves, and we say things we wouldn't dare say to anybody else, at least publicly. And like, why is that? Why would we speak to ourselves in a manner that we would never allow ourselves to speak to anybody else? Or if we saw somebody else, speaking that way to a friend of ours, we'd probably jump in and intervene, be like, dude, shut up. You can't talk that way. That's mean. So that is something that I have really tried to take a look at and really try to improve in my life. And, like anything in life, it's a process, and it takes some effort and some consistent practicing. And the more that I've done it, the better that I've gotten at it, to where now that little inner voice is scarcely critical to me. It is almost always optimistic and encouraging and kind-hearted. So I'm a big believer that we need to exercise some self-compassion towards ourselves. And that's not to say that we want to turn into narcissists, to where, we don't acknowledge, any wrongdoing or apologize when apologies need to happen. It's just a matter of not allowing that inner voice to then, go nuts and start, berailing us. Berailing? Is that even a word? Railing on us? I think that's what I mean. Allow that inner voice to just start railing on us mercilessly, because we made a mistake or whatever. It's just a matter of like, oh yeah, I messed that up. I'm going to give myself some grace and, apologize where needed, and then move on. So give yourself some self-compassion. I am all about it. Exercise grace towards yourself. And just let your inner voice teach it to speak to you lovingly and with encouragement and optimism. And see if that doesn't produce, if nothing else, a little bit lighter, more happy and fulfilling life. All right, everybody. I am going to call it there because I am absolutely exhausted, and I got to get myself to sleep because it is opening night for the patent pending sketch comedy show up at Desert Stages Theater. That's what it's called, up in Scottsdale, Arizona. So I will be doing that, and I'm going to be exhausted, but I'm going to keep my goal of popping out a daily podcast episode. I got to get to 365. And what did I say? This is 323. Oh, I'm getting close, everybody. What is that? Like 42 episodes, 42 more episodes, 42 more days. Yeah, I'm probably going to finish this like right smack dab around Christmas. All right, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I love you all so much. This is the Paul Green Comedy PaulCast for November 14th, 2024, episode 323. I love you all, and I will talk to you tomorrow.